The Lilac Fairy Book. Preface. What cases are you engaged in at present? Are you stopping many teeth just now? What people have you converted lately? The ladies put these questions to men, lawyers, dentists, clergymen, and so forth, who happen to sit next to them at dinner parties. I do not know whether ladies thus indicate their interest in the occupations of their casual neighbors at the hospitable board. But if they do not know me, or do not know me well, they generally ask, "Are you writing anything right now?" As if they should ask a painter, "Are you painting anything right now?" or a lawyer, "Have you any cases at present?" Sometimes they are more definite and inquire, "What are you writing now?" as if I must be writing something, which indeed is the case, though I dislike being reminded of it. It is an awkward question, because the fair being does not care a bobby what I'm writing, nor would she much be enlightened if I reply, "Madam, I am engaged on a treatise intended to prove the normal is prior to conceptual totemism," though that answer would be as true, in fact, as obscure as significance. The best plan seems to be to answer that I have entirely abandoned mere literature, and am contemplating a book on the causes of early blight in the potato, a melancholy circumstance which threatens to deprive us of our chief esculent root. The inquirer would never be undeceived. One nymph, who, like the rest, could not keep off this horrid topic of my occupation, said, "You never write anything but fairy books, do you?" A French gentleman, too, an educationist and expert in portraits of Queen Mary, once sent me a newspaper article in which he had written that I was exclusively devoted to the composition of fairy books, and nothing else. Then he came to England and visited me, and found that I knew rather more about portraits of Queen Mary than he did. In truth, I never did write any fairy books in my life, except Prince Prigio, Prince Ricardo, and Tales from the Fairy Court, that of the aforesaid Prigio. I take this opportunity to recommending these fairy books, poor things, but my own, to parents and guardians who may never have heard them. They are rich in romantic adventure, and the prince always marry the right princesses and live happily ever afterwards, while the wicked witches, stepmothers, tutors, and governesses are never cruelly punished, but retire to the country on ample pensions. I hate cruelty. I never put a wicked stepmother in a barrel and sent her tobogganing down a hill. It is true that Prince Ricardo did kill the yellow dwarf, but that was in a fair fight, sword in hand, and the dwarf, peace to his ashes, died in harness. The object of these confessions is not only that of the advertising of my own fairy books, which are not out of print if your bookseller says so, the truth is not in him, but giving credit where credit is due. The fairy books have been almost wholly the work of Mrs. Lang, who has translated and adapted them from French, German, Portuguese, Italian, Spanish, Catalan, and other languages. My part has been that of Adam, according to Mark Twain, and the Garden of Eden. Eve worked, Adam superintended. I also superintend. I find out where the stories are, and advise, and, in short, superintend. I do not write the stories out of my own head. The reputation of having written all the fairy books, a European reputation in nurseries, and the United States of America, is the burden of an honor unto which I was not born. It weighs upon, and is killing me, as a general fash of being the wife of the Lord of Burleigh. Burleigh House by Stamford Town was too much the villain Magian espoused by that peer. Nobody really wrote most of the stories. People told them in all parts of the world long before Egyptian hieroglyphs or Cretan signs or Cyprian syllables and alphabets were invented. They are older than reading and writing, and arose like wildflowers before men had any education to quarrel over. The grannies told them to their grandchildren, and then the grandchildren became grannies. They repeated the same old tales to the new generation. Homer knew the stories and made up the Odyssey out of half a dozen of them. All of the history of Greece till about 800 BC is a string of fairy tales, all about Theseus and Heracles and Oedipus and Minos and Perseus. Is a cabinet de fées, a collection of fairy tales. Shakespeare took them and put bits into them into King Lear and other plays. He could not have made them up himself, great as he was. Let ladies and gentlemen think of this when they sit down to write fairy tales, and have them nicely typed, and send them to Messrs. Longman and Company to be published. They think that to write a new fairy tale is easy work. They are mistaken. The thing is impossible. Nobody can write a new fairy tale. You can only mix up and dress up the old stories and put your characters into new dresses, as Miss Thackeray did so well in Five Old Friends. If any big girl of 14 reads this preface, let her insist on being presented with Five Old Friends. But the 365 authors who try to write new fairy tales are very tiresome. They always begin with a little boy or girl who goes out and meets the fairies of poianthuses and gardenias and apple blossoms, flowers and fruits and other winged things. These fairies try to be funny and fail, or they try to preach and succeed. Real fairies never preach or talk slang. At the end, the little boy or girl wakes up and finds that he has been dreaming. Such are the new fairy stories, but may be persevered from all the sort of them. Our stories are almost all old, some from Ireland, before the island was as celebrated for her wrongs as for her verdure, some from Asia, made, I dare say, before the Aryan invasion, some from Moidart, Knoidart, Morar, and Andarmarchen, where the sea steams like great clear rivers and the saw-edged hills are blue, and men remember Prince Charlie. Some are from Portugal, where the golden fruits grow in the garden of Hesperides. And some are from wild Wales, and were told at Arthur's court. And others come from the firesides by the kinsmen of the Welsh, the Bretons. There are also modern tales by a learned Scandinavian named Topilus. All of the stories were translated or adapted by Mrs. Lang, except The Jogi's Punishment and Moti, which were done by Major Campbell out of the Pushtu language, How Brave Walter Hunted Wolves, which with Little Lassie and the Raspberry Worm was done by Topilus and Miss Harding, and The Sea King's Gift by Miss Christie from the same author. It has been suggested to the editor that children and parents and guardians would like the Grey True Ghost Story book. He knows that the children would like them, and he would gladly give it to them, but about the taste of fond, anxious mothers and kind aunts, he is not quite so certain. Before he was 12, the editor knew true ghost stories enough to fill a volume. They were a pure joy till bedtime, but then, and later, were not wholly a source of unmixed pleasure. At the same time, the editor was not afraid of the dark, for he thought, if a ghost is here, we can't see him. But when older and better informed persons said that ghosts brought their own light with them, which is too true, then one's emotions were such as parents do not desire the young to endure. For this reason, the Grey True Ghost Story book is never likely to be illustrated by Mr. Ford.